want the third mic per se.
Yes. And the two on the floor.
And I think he just tried.
Good morning, everyone. We'll start the program right now. It's 11:30 because we have YouTube running at the same time, so it's like that. Thank you. So good morning. My name is Goke Taiwo. I'm with the Office of Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights. I'm the program manager for the CMS Federal Women's Employee Resource Program. I'd like to welcome those of you that are here in the auditorium and those that have joined us remotely from the outlying offices in Baltimore, Bethesda, DC, and the regions. Today we celebrate the Women's History Month. The 2017 theme is titled Honoring Trailblazing Women in Labor and Business. Today's program will begin with a slide presentation from the National Women's History Month Project, highlighting 5 women who have successfully challenged the role of women in both business and paid labor force. These women all successfully challenge the social and legal structures that have kept women's labor unappreciated and underpaid. While each honoree is extraordinary, each is also ordinary in their own way, proving that women in business and labor leaders can and should be considered the norm. The 2017 National Women Honoree will also include our keynote speaker, Ms. Liz Richter. Please enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Women's History Month program, honoring trailblazing women in labor and business. Sponsored by the CMS Federal Women's Group, guest speaker and CMS honoree, Elizabeth Richter, March 30th, 2017. 2017 National Women's History Month honorees. CMS Federal Women's Group. This year's theme for National Women's History Month, honoring trailblazing women in labor and business, salutes women who have successfully challenged the roles and accomplishments of women in both business and the paid workforce. The 2017 honorees represent women who have greatly influenced America's history by challenging social and legal structures that have kept women's labor underappreciated and underpaid. Barbara HACKMAN Franklin, 2017 National Honoree. Ms. Barbara HACKMAN Franklin's trailblazing career includes extensive governmental and corporate work. Ms. Franklin is one of the first women to graduate from Harvard Business School. As the 29th U.S. Secretary of Commerce, she normalized commercial relations between U.S. and China. Ms. Franklin is an expert on corporate governance, auditing, and financial reporting practices. Ms. Franklin has served 5 U.S. presidents and has led efforts to increase the number of women in government. ALEXIS HERMAN, 2017 National Honoree. In 1992, Ms. ALEXIS HERMAN became the first African American to serve as an assistant to the President in the Office of Public Liaison. On May 1, 1997, Ms. Herman was sworn in as America's 23rd Secretary of Labor and was the first African American to lead the U.S. Department of Labor. Ms. Herman speaks to audiences about work-life balance, career management, and discusses the politics in today's workplace. Lilly Ledbetter, 2017 National Honoree. After 19 years of working for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, Ms. Ledbetter received an anonymous note informing her of significant wage differences between men and women. In response, Ms. Ledbetter filed a gender discrimination case and began her legal fight to bridge the gap between wages paid to men versus women. As a result, on January 29, 2009, President Barack Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act into law to enforce equal pay for women who perform the same job as men. Maggie Lena Walker, 2017 National Honoree. Ms. Maggie Lena Walker was born on July 15, 1864 in Richmond, Virginia. She was born during an era when women and minorities faced many social and economic challenges. Ms. Walker attended school and graduated in 1883. After leaving her job as a teacher, she was the first African American woman in the U.S. to charter a bank and open a department store. Her success as a business leader and community organizer has inspired women around the world. Addie L. Wyatt, 2017 National Honoree. Ms. Addie L. Wyatt is one of the country's most notable labor union leaders, women's rights advocate, and civil rights activist. In 1953, Ms. Addie L. Wyatt became the first African American woman to serve in the Local 56 of the United Packing House Workers of America, UPWA. An ordained minister, Ms. Wyatt and her husband founded the Vernon Park Church of God and began working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1975, Time magazine named her one of 12 Women of the Year. Elizabeth Richter, 2017 CMS Honoree. Ms. Elizabeth Liz Richter began her CMS career in 1990. Liz worked in the Bureau of Policy Development, where she specialized in inpatient hospital payment policy and worked on a variety of Medicare payment issues. In 1998, Liz began working in the Office of Financial Management, where in 2001, she became Director of the Financial Services Group. In 2003, Liz became Director of the Hospital and Ambulatory Policy Group in the Center for Medicare Management, currently the Center for Medicare. And since 2007, she has advanced her career by serving as the Deputy Center Director. CMS Federal Women's Group. Thank you for your participation. To learn more about the CMS Federal Women's Group, contact Yolanda Johnson, Employee Resource Group Liaison, Affirmative Employment Group, Office of Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights at 410-786-9377.
Good morning. My name is Susanna Lang. On behalf of Tamara Jones, CMS Federal Women's Employee Resource Group, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to today's Women's History program. The Federal Women's Group is a CMS employee resource group that is a valuable mechanism to build a culture that includes diversity and inclusion, offer employee access to leadership opportunities, establish program and activities aligned with the CMS mission, provide development, growth, and mentoring opportunities for employees, and offer unique perspectives and innovative solutions to challenges faced by CMS. In 1981, Congress asked President Ronald Reagan to make a Women's History Week proclamation for the following year. His 1982 proclamation read in part, "As leaders in public affairs, American women not only work to secure their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also were principal advocates in the boundless temperaments, mental health reform, industrial, labor, and social reform movements, as well as the modern civil rights movement. Their dedication and commitment heightened awareness of our society's needs and accelerated our common efforts to meet those needs." President Reagan and his administration began a tradition that year, issuing and proclaiming Women's History Week until they realized that the accomplishments of American women could not possibly be all celebrated in 1 week. It had to be a month. Therefore, in 1987, the week was expanded to a month. And every president since Reagan has continued that tradition. Every year, the National Women's History Project creates a theme. This year's theme is honoring and trailblazing women in the labor and business. The 2017 theme honors women who have successfully challenged roles in both labor and business force. Statistics show that women have always worked, but they have been undervalued and unpaid. In 2015, the American Association of University Women revealed that working women within the United States working full-time typically were paid 80% of what men were paid. Many times the accomplishments of women have been written out of American history. One of the goals of the CMS Federal Women's Group is to ensure men and women are educated on the accomplishments of women in society. Recognizing the vast achievements of women in all fields such as science, government, medicine, has a huge impact on the development of self-respect, of new opportunities for young girls and young women. The individuals honored by the National Women's History Project, as well as our CMS honoree, prove that women can succeed in every field. Most importantly, the 2017 honorees paved the way for generations of women leaders to follow. Our guest speaker, Ms. Liz Richter, Deputy Center Director for the Centers for Medicare, has worked here for 27 years. She has a can-do attitude and is respected among her colleagues and staff. Liz has a remarkable journey, and she will provide us with tools that we can implement in our daily lives. We are privileged that Liz took the time to participate in this important event. At this time, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Liz Richter.
So I'm an easy blusher, so I assume I am blushing. What I want to do is talk a little bit about sort of how I got here, and then I'm going to spend a lot of time telling you why that doesn't matter to you for how you get where you want to go. because we are all different, and that means we all have different journeys, and there are multiple ways to achieve them. You saw my bio on there. I won't go through that. I'll say I grew up in sort of an unusual circumstance. My father is a high-energy physicist. He was a professor at Stanford. Stanford has a lot of land from when the Stanfords founded it, and so a lot of faculty actually live on campus. And so the question when you were talking to your friends about what your parents, when I was born, mostly your father, did was like, where do they teach? Not, you know, what subject do they have their PhD in? So that would be the first difference, where I don't think my model is sort of everybody's model. Parents were always very supportive, treated me and my brother the same as far as what we were interested was great. When I found out I was a bit of a math nerd, Dad did extra math homework with me in 4th grade, which I thought was wonderful. That will tell you something else about me, that like doing extra algebra problems was like my idea of a good time. I majored in economics, both as an undergrad and a grad student, and after leaving grad school, deciding that working on a PhD was not something I was as interested in when I was in the middle of it as I was when I was applying to do it. Actually, that's when I came to then HCFA, now CMS, in 1990, and I've been here ever since, starting in hospital payment policy, which the people who work on hospital payment policy now will tell you they can tell because of the kinds of questions I ask them when they're bringing me a policy issue, that it's sort of all still founded in when I was the analyst that was doing the work that they're now doing. I had the opportunity to do a bunch of different things in Medicare fee-for-service, payment policy, and then in 1998 I got my first management job, which was in the Office of Financial Management. That was a great favor to me, I have to say, looking back on it, the fact that my first management job wasn't in the area that I had been working. Because I think one of the things first-time managers always struggle with is to what extent you try and do the work yourself, and to what extent you try and learn how to help other people get done what you're all responsible for doing. The area I was in, some of it I was pretty good at, some of it I didn't have much experience in at all, and so that was never a temptation to me to sort of just say, oh, it would be faster for me to just do this myself. And I was pretty lucky looking back on that to have a situation where it was harder to fall into that trap than it would have been if I had been managing a group I had previously been a part of. Did several different jobs in OFM and then came back to Medicare fee-for-service in 2003, running the group that basically was the descendant of where I had started working when I first came to the agency in 1990, and now I'm the deputy director for fee-for-service for the Center for Medicare. So I'll say I don't do a lot of formal career planning, so I'm not going to be a good model for sort of how you do that and have it, what you learn from doing it well and what you learn from doing it sort of more aspirationally than realistically, which I think can sometimes be an issue people have. But again, I think everybody has to figure out their career journey based on them. So what you're good at, what you know a lot about, what your personality is suited to, and what your interests are. It is perfectly okay to say, my job is about making sure that my non-job life is economically feasible, and I'm going to do my job really well, but that's not where my focus in life is. And my values for my job are going to be, how do they help me, how does it help me do the things outside of work that are really important to me, whether that's whatever that is. It's also perfectly fine to say work is a really predominant focus and you want to proceed down a career path and then try and figure out how to how to accomplish that. I think some things for sort of everybody to focus on, again, doing the job you have really well. I think sometimes people are more focused on where they want to be next, and they sort of forget that the way you get to where you want to be next is founded on being where you are and doing that really effectively. Working with your manager to figure out opportunities to learn new skills, new knowledge bases. One of the things, for instance, we've done in the Center for Medicare, we have a monthly seminar series that we actually started as an opportunity for people to be able to practice public speaking in a safe environment. When I was an analyst, I remember a friend of mine telling me the first time she did a speech, it was in front of 400 providers who hated what we had just announced we were doing. And that was the first time she had ever had to speak to a group of people in public. And you can imagine how intimidating that was, coming into a room that sort of oozed hostility. And so we wanted to provide this environment to people, both so folks could learn what other people in the agency are doing, and also so people could practice public speaking, which becomes more and more important typically as you move farther down your career path. Toastmasters is another way to do the same thing that's not as CMS centric. But there always are opportunities to both go hear people who are effective speakers, you can learn from that, and finding opportunities where you can do presentations that can be kind of informal to kind of small groups of people to start with, and you just start getting more comfortable sort of learning how to talk effectively about what you're doing and measuring the audience. I'll tell you I still remember this, the worst presentation I ever did. I was a group director at the time, so it was not early, and it was on something I knew backwards and forwards, upwards, up and down, every little detail, and I was talking to somebody who didn't know the details. They needed to know the high-level outcomes of what the issue was. And I knew the issue so well, it was really hard for me to step back from it and just give the high-level message. And I think that's one of the things that you have to keep learning and practicing is, given if you're doing presentations, given who you're presenting to, what do they need to know? Do they actually need to know every little detail that you had to work out to get to where you ended up? Or do they just need to know the top-line message, why you got there, and sort of move on? It's hard because one of the reasons you're giving the speech is because you worked hard on this and you find it fascinating, and everybody else should be just as fascinated as you are. And they would be if they had the time. But they don't always have the time, and so figuring out how to sort of focus your message to get the result that you're supposed to get, whether it's educational, whether it's getting a decision from somebody who has 75 other things on their plate, and you have sort of 5 minutes of their attention and focus, and you have to figure out how to use that 5 minutes to get what you want out of it, or whatever the topic is. I think that takes lots of practice, and so finding opportunities where you can do that either informally or more formally as you sort of get more practice, giving presentations to your boss, then giving presentations maybe to your boss's boss. Those kinds of things I think are all valuable and will help you sort of no matter what your career path is as you want to move along. Being able to sort of do good analysis work and to be able to explain it, whether you're talking or whether you're writing, I think is a key to almost all the jobs around here, and probably most jobs in general. Written material is shared with a lot more people than you can have a face-to-face conversation with, and so being able to write something that's appropriate for what you're writing, the way you write a reg is different than the way you write a press release, as an example. And that effectively conveys your message inside the environment of what you're actually trying to write, and that makes it clear to people that you really have evaluated an issue, you've evaluated all sides of it, and the reason you're making the recommendation you are, or the proposal you are, or whatever is well thought out and you've sort of thought through the pros and cons and that's why you've gotten there. That's not the same as people agreeing with you. I think that can be a really hard thing as you're as you're starting to sort of develop your career. You've analyzed your issue, you've come up with your recommendation, you know you are right. And the decision is made to go another way. That's not mostly because the person who makes the decision is wrong. It's usually because they have a lot more factors they have to take into account as they're making a decision. I've seen in my over 26 years of work, I think 2 examples where the pro was, this is the only legal way to do it, and the con was, we'd be breaking the law if we didn't do it. Which is easy for there's like no decision to make at that point. Yes, we like to not break the law. We like to do what the law says. But almost always you're dealing with balancing different benefits and different costs of different options, especially in the work we do in this agency, regardless of where you are. This isn't a Medicare-centric point of view. That's where a lot of my experience is, but it's true everywhere. And the whole reason that you think about options and you think about pros and cons is so that people can see what they are and understand how they're weighing them, given the other things that are going on in their world. And one of the reasons we go through, for those of you who have had this experience, I'm seeing a lot of you who I know have, one of the reasons we go through so many levels of clearance before we finalize something is that to get all those different points of view, so you get much more of a 360-degree view of what the right decision is to do something, and sort of coming to peace with that early on, and sort of owning, doing a really good job of explaining the issue, but not owning a particular answer is really important to succeeding here, because that's what the civil service folks at this agency, of whom I am very proudly one, that's our job. Our job is to give our bosses the options and the consequences of the different actions, and then to support their decision and carry it out the best way we know how. And so getting yourself to a point where you remember that even if they didn't pick your favorite option, which happens to all of us frequently, right? The next phase of the discussion is, how do you do a good job of making it happen? And if you can be seen as somebody who can make that pivot easily and effectively, that is only going to help you as you move along. And that's true no matter what. It could be which bidder you pick on a contractor. It doesn't have to be a policy issue around how you pay a provider. It could be how you prioritize change requests for a given IT system, and what's more important to move faster and what you can actually wait a bit on, even if it's somebody's, and every one of them is somebody's most important thing. But how you sort of decide which one is the agency's most important thing is sort of a different issue, and figuring out how to bridge that gap is really important as you want to develop your career. I would say mentors is another thing I would mention as important, and not necessarily, the formal mentorship program is really valuable and people should take advantage of it. Mentors don't have to be all or nothing. You can see one of your colleagues who just had a really great way of describing something and say to yourself, well, for that purpose, maybe I need to spend a little time understanding sort of how they translate a particular issue to the way they describe it. And I can learn something from them. A mentor that can be your presentation mentor. You could have somebody else who's your written mentor, whose, papers always come back with the equivalent of, that was perfectly written, I absolutely understand the issue, no changes, loved it, right? You can learn from that person too, even if they're not as good at presenting things or planning or something else. You don't have to just pick one person to have a mentorship relationship, even at the same time. And I mean, I've been really lucky. I actually have learned a lot from all of my bosses along the road and many colleagues also as I have gone along. And I think part of that is sort of understanding yourself and what you're good at and what you still have to work on. That's changed for me over the years. It's not like I think I've achieved perfection by any stage at this point, but the things that I sort of want to work on now are probably different than they were 20, 25 years ago when I was sort of really learning the work, where a lot of my focus would have been on what can I learn about the agency and the programs. And now it's more about thinking about how I work with people and how to make that even more effective and, you know, getting to a positive outcome, which can mean a lot of different things, including mostly now at this point, I'm worried about helping other people get their work done really well, as opposed to less about me directly. I actually don't do a lot of work in the sense of, I actually wrote a paper on Monday, which is the first time I've written something from scratch in a long time. Right? So I'm not at the stage right now where I'm doing that as much. I'm more helping people figure out how to sort of burnish their written products and make them more effective. And so I have different things to think about, sort of about how I wanna work. But knowing yourself and listening to people when they give you feedback, being willing to take honest feedback in a non-defensive way, it's hard, right? Whenever somebody's telling you, here's something you didn't do as well as I wish you had, it's really hard to sort of think about why they might be right and not start your counter argument about, but, here are all the circumstances, here's the reason it happened the way it did. But the more you sort of get the value of people giving that to you, the more you can sort of learn about where you can go to make things better as you sort of move along. And it's hard. It's a hard conversation on both sides. And so anything you can do to sort of harvest as much from it, you'll actually get more feedback the better you receive it. And that can only help you. That doesn't mean you have to, if somebody says something to you that you think is totally wrong, you just have to say thank you, I'll take that into consideration and move forward. You can of course discuss whether they were missing something or something like that, but just try and think about the extent to which the extent to which you can work on what they're identifying, and it can help you be even stronger the next time you go back. And I think being honest with yourself about, I started out as a total depth person, like I wanted to be the total master of the issues that I was responsible for, and I was for a little while. And I've gotten much more interested in knowing something about a lot of stuff. I would say that has to be the mindset you're in if you sort of want to move into management and leadership opportunities. You don't get the chance when you're a division director, a group director, deputy center director, whatever, to like have total mastery of one issue where you're the person who knows the most about it in the universe. And the trade-off you make for that is there's a lot of stuff you know about. And so if you're sort of, I used to say I felt sometimes like I was a prairie dog in the cubicles when I was first starting, because I'd sort of always be popping up saying, oh, that sounds interesting. You know, what's that about? And try and find out more about what people are doing. And if that's the mindset you have, both of them are really important, and this agency would grind to a halt without both kinds of people. And you don't have to be the same person through your whole career. You're going to have times where you want to be a breadth person, where you're learning about a lot of different things, but maybe not quite as deep into them. And you're going to have parts of your career where you want to be a depth person, where there are 2 or 3 things that you know almost everything or everything about. Those are both really important to this agency working well, and just figuring out where you are on that sort of scale and how you might be shifting is going to help you decide sort of how you want your career to move as you're starting to think about when you want to look for new opportunities. And again, sort of having somebody, this is one place where a mentor who you have a general relationship with can be really helpful as you sort of talk through those kinds of issues. And what about your current job you love? What about your current job you still love, but maybe it's getting a little stale because you've been doing it for a long time and you want to experience something, something new. And what do you see that other people do that you don't have that much experience with, but you would like to learn about more? There's a lot of training in the agency now that is relatively low cost if you can find the space in your current job to sort of avail yourself of the training. Some of it's pretty formal in classroom stuff. Some of it's informal. CMS.gov, Medicare.gov, Medicaid.gov, the Marketplace website, all of those websites have incredible resources about the programs that we run for the country, where you can learn a lot about what this agency does, even in areas that you aren't as familiar with. That's one thing that's a lot easier to do than when I was starting here. I mean, when I was starting here, there was one computer in every group of 4 cubes, and you had to talk to the people in that pot of cubes to sort of decide who was going to get to use the computer when, depending on what you were working on. So you imagine that world. I was lucky. I was in a group of cubes with people who really still liked using typewriters, and so I got to use the computer almost whenever I wanted to. But imagine that world when I was starting out with the world now, where everybody's got a laptop. That means you've all got access, and there's a lot more stuff just available through the computer where you can just learn a lot more in an informal way instead of waiting for an opportunity to check out a book or attend a class or something like that. And I would avail myself of those. I was looking something up last night about what the Social Security Act said about inpatient rehabilitation hospitals, for example. So you can that's always there. And a lot easier to use, and take advantage of it. And I would say also OHC has done a lot about making courses available to folks, both for learning skills and for learning content, in a way that you should really feel that you should take advantage of. But really what I want to focus on, and I want to leave a lot of time for questions, that's why I keep looking at the clock to make sure I don't just keep babbling until we're done. Everybody has a different path. I was looking, right before I came down here, I was looking at the bios that they did for all the senior executive service members in the agency for the new leadership team, and looking at how we all got here. My favorite was a person whose undergraduate degree was in aviation management. And actually, it was Jeff Hinson. He was in the Air Force before he became a member of the civil service. There are, of course, a lot of us who I have economics degrees. There are a lot of people who have public policy degrees, but also English, history, electrical engineering, math. Somebody is here in the SES who started as an elementary school teacher and then came to CMS and decided that she wanted to take her career in a different direction. So there are, of course, a lot of clinicians too. Sometimes your job, and lawyers, sometimes your job actually, your degrees and your background do limit. I could never be a lawyer for the government. I don't have a law degree. I am not going back to school at this point. Jobs that have clinical, I'm never going to be Sherry's successor as Deputy Chief Medical Officer because I am not going to med school either. So sometimes your background and your education limits what jobs you can and can't do, but actually around here I would say not nearly as often as you might think, other than those things that have very particular backgrounds. I think we're all in a place where you can get training to do the kinds of things you might be interested in. We have an English major in charge of the Medicare administrative contractors right now. who learned how to do contract administration not in school, but while he was working. And so think about how you can pick up skills, how you can pick up knowledge. Those have overlap, but they're not the same thing. You can become a contractor, a contracting officer, representative. You can become a project manager. There are a lot of things like that that sort of translate to different parts of the agency. And think about the kinds of things you're interested in working on, and then sort of you can think about what you need to learn and grow into to make you a more attractive candidate to sort of take that work on. And it changes over time. My answers to all of those questions about what do I want to work on, what kind of work do I want to do I want to be a manager, do I want to be a second line manager, do I want to be a leader, do I want to be a technical expert, all of those answers have changed for me throughout my career. And so don't think it's not a one and done conversation where you sort of say on your first day at CMS, in 5 years I want to be X, and then I'm done. I mean, it's going to evolve over time, it's going to change, and that's to be expected. And I think this is a very easy place to try on different kinds of careers within the agency. I have to say, I've seen that there's actually a fair amount of movement around the agency for people who still who really support our mission and really want to work here, but want to experience different aspects of that. And so taking advantage of the fact that compared to some places, it's probably easier to do internal movements and evolve into different jobs. I think that helps too. I think when people are looking for second line managers and sort of up, one of the things they're looking for often is that you've had experience in more than one area, because that just gives you more tools of how to react to particular issues, more people to call on for help who you've worked with. Because you know them. I think sometimes for people now, one of the things I'm most valuable for is I say, have you ever talked to XYZ about that? They probably know something about that. And sort of drawing those links that you might not know about if you've always sort of had a home in one particular part of the agency. And so I think that's another thing that really can help as you're going on, and one of the reasons why moving around a little bit can help you advance to whatever your ultimate goals are at the time. And your goal for now, again, doesn't have to be your goal forever. So that was pretty disorganized, but we still have 18 minutes left for questions. So let me stop and let people talk.
I'd like to thank you very much for your time. At this time, we'd like to have an interactive question and answer session. We have 2 microphones on the aisle that you can go to. So we'll start with the auditorium and open the lines up on the phone for those to ask questions. So, thank you.
I have to stand up for it, though. Liz, over time, as you've changed your jobs, I'm interested in knowing, now that you deal a lot more so with industry leaders and different associations, how is it that you go about delivering messages to them that are mostly sometimes not very popular based on decisions we have to make?
So people know when you're not being direct. Direct isn't the same as blunt and is not the same as mean. But I think the best way to tell people bad news is first to make clear that you have heard them, right? So doing I know what you're asking for is this, I know here's the situation you find yourself in, checking that you actually have heard what they're saying. And so, you're not operating under a misapprehension of what their actual issue is, and then sort of saying, here's where I think we are. It's very rare that you're the last answer, and so you want to leave a little wiggle room, like we don't really see how we can get where you want us to for the following reasons. You don't want to make it sound like there's absolutely no way to do something and then find out that they meet with somebody else in the agency who gets them somewhere else. But I think, you know, being pretty direct and not you want to leave a little wiggle room for whoever's coming after, whoever's having the next meeting. Those of you who have met with a lot of outside people who you give bad news to know that you very rarely the last meeting. That would be true no matter who was in the room. Like if Dr. Price were sitting in the room, it's more often he would be the last meeting if they actually got to the secretary, but not always. And so you want to leave room if there is room. Sometimes the answer is the law doesn't allow that in our mind, and they can then sort of figure out how they want to address that. Laws can be changed, but we're not the ones who do that. And you move on from there. And sometimes I think remembering, I've talked to folks, friends of mine who have been on the outside and then have come here, or vice versa, and remembering like how we appear to the folks we're talking to from the outside compared to how we appear to ourselves, right? We're all just people, we're working here in different ways and all of that. We oftentimes are giving them an answer that's going to make a pretty fundamental difference to the way they do their business, whether it's telling a provider they can or can't do something the way they have been doing it, and so they're going to have to reorganize the way they do things, telling a manufacturer of an item that we can't pay for it the way the law is written, telling a contractor that they didn't win a bid, telling a job applicant, if you're an OHC, that we went a different direction and they didn't get a job. We're making a much bigger impact on their current situation than it's making on us, because we're running a much bigger program that has a much bigger impact. You know, if you look at this agency overall, we do over $1 trillion of business a year, if you look across all of our business lines. And so one particular provider, one particular customer, one particular stakeholder has a relatively small piece of that, but to them it's really central. And I think trying to remember that you're giving them an answer that has a much bigger impact on them than you're probably thinking through as you're thinking, well, they want to do this and that's not what the regulations say, so the answer is no. And sort of dealing with them in that environment, I think, helps too, so they feel like they've been heard. They'll still be frustrated and they'll still be angry, and they have the right to be. You know, as long as they don't take it out on you. They don't have the right to do that, but they do have the right to be upset when you're giving them news that they didn't want to hear, and sort of remembering that too and moving on, I think, helps.
Liz, thank you for your service and congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. I still remember NEO. You spoke at my NEO. I think you've spoken, you've shared your minutes for other people's orientation as well. And I remember your describing the scope of this agency's work. I literally, my jaw dropped. I've gone back to those numbers in terms of how many people are taught to tell them the funds, as you just mentioned. My question to you is to share your wisdom with us about periods of transition, because you've seen a few of these, and I think your counsel would be helpful for us.
So I'll say a little, and also want to recognize that depending on where you sit, it can feel very different. And so taking that into account. Periods of transition are hard, just from a person, right? It's always hard. Like if you get take out the political transition, when your immediate boss changes, it's hard. You have to, even if you love the new boss and loved the old boss, or any combination of that, I mean, it's just hard to get used to a new person, how they want to do things, that sort of how they communicate, all of that. And basically what transitions of administrations is all the top line bosses change at the same time, right? So so you have the challenge of learning how to deal with new leadership, how they hear things, how you find out their priorities, how you find out as you're talking to them about an issue, what kind of analysis they want so that they're comfortable making a decision, how they're going to weigh different pros and cons, and how that differs from the folks that you worked with before. That, what I would say is, that always happens when your leadership changes. It's just that it all is happening at the same time. That makes it sort of more universal. It's not like you can go to, like the last time we had a new center director in the Center for Medicare, that was the one change. So you could always go talk to somebody in CMCS at that point, and they weren't dealing with the same thing that you were at that time, whereas now we all are. And so you sort of don't have that, those places where the leadership is not moving around. Having said that, I'll go back to what I said about being comfortable being a member of the civil service. Our job is to let them know what needs to happen and what can happen, what the consequences of different choices are, both positive and negative, what their sort of legal swim lanes are around where they can and can't effectuate change, and what kind of timescales there are. For instance, something that you can change by issuing a frequently asked question has a different time scale than where you have to change a regulation that has a different time scale than what you have to do is talk about whether the agency wants to have a legislative proposal to change the laws. And so that's one of the things, that's what elections are about, is finding out what that high level leadership guidance is, and then our role as public servants is to remember both of the words there. We serve the public has spoken about the leadership they want for the next term, and to make sure that our bosses understand what the impact of decisions they could make is, and then executing them accordingly. And it's a really important role, right? Think about how much more disruptive a change like this would be if there weren't a core group of people who understood the programs and kept things running and could tell people what the implications of various decisions were, as to what they were doing, and then could execute them. It would be much more disruptive to the country as a whole if you flipped over that. And so we have a really critical role when transitions happen, and that's where I retreat back to, is that it is better for everybody to have us in the role that we are in, providing the continuity, the expertise, making sure the programs keep running, making sure people are informed of what the impact of decisions is going to be, and making sure that we execute them in a way where we gain their trust at the same time as we are effective stewards of the programs, so that they sort of accept our analysis of the impact of different changes that could be made, but don't confuse that with us having the right to pick the priorities. That's what the policy leadership is for. And it can be hard when you've been, so this isn't not a political comment, because this is just a change comment. It can be hard, as everybody knows who has ever had a new boss, when they have kept on working on something. You've been going along one path, and you know what people want you to do, and you know what they view as success, and then you get a new boss, or a new second line boss, or a new administrator, or a new whomever, and they want you to go a different direction, and that's tough. That, I'm not trying to say it's easy, because it's not. It's just happening in more areas all at the same time, and that is challenging. It can be exciting also, and depending on what you're working on and what opportunities are sort of opening up as far as options to explore that maybe hadn't been open before, and figuring out how to sort of find those positive aspects of it in the middle of, I mean, humans are risk averse, right? So uncertainty is hard for all of us. It doesn't matter, like, any outside view of sort of strength or anything about a particular direction. We like to know what's gonna happen. We like to get up in the morning and know when we come into work, here are the 3 things we're going to work on, and we're going to keep working in the same direction we have been for a while, all of us. Even thrill seekers, you still, there are still things in your life where, having that certainty gives you a sense of comfort. And so it is okay to feel very unsettled when things are uncertain. It is human, it is universal. And it's sort of figuring out how we all work together and adapt, and what our very critical role is in making that happen, and supporting the people we work with, the people we work for, the programs we work in. And I think that's the way to find your way to navigate it.
Hi Liz, my name's Catherine, and I've been at CMS for 1 year. In addition to thanking you for being here today, thank you so much for all the people that you've mentored, because it gave me a lot of really positive experiences this year. I wouldn't have had the Chris Ritters in my life if I didn't have you to mentor them. So thank you so much for that. My question has to do with this survey that was taken in the tech industry called the Elephant in the Valley survey. So it's this survey of women in tech in like San Francisco area, and kind of how their work is impacted by their gender. One of the really interesting findings was that like 66% of women who filled out this survey said that they felt like they were left out of networking opportunities. So in addition, which suggests to me that like, okay, well, if more than half of the industry is women, then kind of like there's more that we could do to help each other, not blaze new trails, but take roads less traveled. So could you talk a little bit about some of your experiences, either as you developed in your career where you noticed there were gaps that could have been filled, or successes that you had that led you to where you are today?
So one thing I'll say is, one of the things I'm always working on is, so I sometimes fall into the trap of thinking I'm an analyst with a really nice cube, and that's how everybody should interact with me. And I sort of forget it can be kind of intimidating to come talk to somebody who's maybe your boss's boss's boss. right? And just get to know them a little bit and talk and find out sort of if they have any guidance for you, or just get to know them a little better. I will tell you, one of the things I hate about the job I'm in now is how many doors people have to get through before they can come talk to me, which means a lot, and how infrequently I'm in my office because this place lives on meetings. We get an awful lot done, but it means it's hard to just informally go find somebody and chat about something. And I hate how hard it is for people to just come and talk. I wish more people would do that. And so I think one opportunity I wish I had known more about at the beginning of my career, when I never would have taken me up on the offer. Now, to be honest, this is a do as I say, not as I did kind of comment, but I think you'll find that people in different parts of the agency, whether they're in leadership, whether they're in just different roles, are much more willing to talk about what they're doing, how they can help, the kinds of work they do, and how they got there, than I think people take advantage of. And so figuring out sort of how to do that. I'm not saying you should be the equivalent of the little kid in the back seat saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? I'm not saying that. But I think there actually is much more of an opportunity to do sort of multiplexing of sort of who you talk to and who you interact with when you have a, if you don't want to just have a general, how do I do this conversation, when you have something you're wrestling with, and the number of people who you can sort of talk to find out how they could help, I think, take advantage of the fact that the world is a lot more informal now than it was when I started, and people are much more willing to have those conversations across levels, time permitting, right? We all have a lot of work to do, and I'm not, as much as I would love, like I would love to be able to have essentially office hours. You can tell, again, academic background, where people could just come talk to me about whatever they wanted to for a couple of hours a week. That would be, I would love that. My calendar is my master and doesn't allow something like that, but figuring out a way to sort of take advantage of that and ask for that, I think could be something that would be really helpful, just as an example. I don't know if, I'm staring at Lorraine and Diane because they're right in front of me, but I don't know if you have any other easy answers to that. So.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chair.
Okay.
This time we'll come to the end of the program. And also the Office of Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights and the Federal Women's Program would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation as the 2017 honoree. Thank you very much.